In today's music landscape, independence is everywhere. But clarity, that's rare. Artists have more access than ever before, from distribution to marketing tools to data, even audiences. Yet many are still navigating the industry alone, mistaking access for understanding. What does independence actually require? And what responsibilities come with it? In this entry of the Cultural Record, we explore those questions with Drew DeLeon, founder of the Digilogue, a community platform built to help artists navigate music with context, connection, and cultural literacy. This isn't about music shortcuts, nor is it about how to get into the industry. It's about the systems shaping independent music today. This is the Cultural Record. So you mentioned like Digilogue, and you spent years building out this community of not platforms, not tech, but people, right? Well, what responsibility do you feel like is in that role that you carry?
I think there's a huge responsibility in the weight that a lot of creatives and artists, I always consider them like unicorns, but we understand the world of music is also mostly business.
Right.
So I feel like there's like really just an obligation to help them navigate the space, because outside of their creativity, to understand the music business, there's so many factors and layers to it. To be able to provide resources that are only free but accessible, and also allow people that are experts in the space to be approachable and accessible for them.
Right.
Now, I think that was really important, because now as we kind of go through this transformation in the music industry through AI and different like terms, I'm still learning a lot of things. You can only imagine like what the new artist is experiencing in 2026.
Right.
So I think that was really my goal. Like, how do I create a space for resources, an access point, a starting point, and also build a space for community? Because artists, we know, love to work by themselves, but they need to find like-minded people to help them lift themselves up.
What do you think artists misunderstand about what independent actually requires?
Well, I think on the independent side, artists don't understand that it requires a team of people, right? To be able to like also trust people,
right?
Because for most artists, independence sometimes is this a belief that that weight of responsibility is all on them.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean like, you can't work with people that you haven't worked with before. You have to like also know how to do certain things, like have an idea of like, okay, this is what I want for my videos. This is what I want for my photos. So having an idea, being able to research those things is important, but be able to hire people based off like, hey, I'm hiring a videographer because I know exactly what I want.
Right.
Hiring a photographer because I know the look and feel that I want. Not solely just like putting all the responsibility on someone,
Right.
but having like the tastes and like the POV to be like, this is how I want to like be, my photographs to be like, my videos to be like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to be experts, but you have to understand how those things work at least.
The misconception is just like when people think independent is like everyone's doing it themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's where burnout happened. That's where
For sure.
careers go to die, essentially. You know what I mean? So yeah, I agree in terms of like, okay, independent means you need a team, and a team where everybody eats, right? It's not a team that like you're hiring people in. You just got to sell the vision, sell the movement, and go at it with that team,
100%.
Yeah.
But I think from a team standpoint, it could be fractional, where like you hire, I'm gonna hire Irvin for his cinematography and creative direction for like this campaign. And I'm gonna hire, Drew for like his design. In different moments, you kind of know the people that you can go to.
Right.
It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm gonna work with these people full time.
Yeah.
Like you kind of have your A squad depending on like different scenarios.
Yeah. That's where you kind of take your mind off of like being an artist into like being a business. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Business, and that comes down with experience.
Yeah.
Your level of like your taste as that grows. You're like, this is what I want for myself, as I want to see myself as an artist.
Right.
Where you start from versus just seeing like, okay, this is the destination, and then I want to go the way that I want to present myself.
I don't know if this one might be a tough one to answer.
Okay.
But from your vantage point, what's the biggest gap between what artists are told they need versus what they actually need?
Going to that question, like you said, there's no one size fit all answer. At the core of it, I think it always starts with the music. You know, I think you can't cheat the craft.
Right.
Like the minute you cheat the craft in terms of how you approach the music, you want to bypass things, just be able to like, you know, fast track. If the product itself, the music that you're creating feels inauthentic or isn't your like maximum output,
Yeah.
then there's that. You're cheating yourself, you're cheating your fans, and I think that's first and foremost.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I think just understanding the legalities of the music industry. So if I'm an artist, the first person I'm hiring from a fractional standpoint is a lawyer. Like I need to protect my music, my rights, my copyright.
People
like,
don't get that information.
Yeah. I'm not even hiring a manager.
Right.
I'm hiring a lawyer because I need to understand how I collect royalties, either it's mechanical royalties, publishing royalties, neighboring rights, sync royalties, everything. Like how do I make money? You know, in terms
the
of
lawyer gets you there.
well, just understand from a contractual standpoint, if I enter this contract with distribution, if I go through a publishing company, if I want to license my music for sync, like I need to understand, and you can hire these people from an hourly basis, you know, they don't have to be on retainer.
Right.
You know, they can review contracts for you.
Yeah.
You can even hire a paralegal at the very least who's part of a firm. You don't have to hire like the senior lawyer.
Yeah.
You know,
it's crazy because I think from my vantage point, the biggest gap is everyone is just like, let me just build an audience before anything. You know what I mean? And yes, an audience is obviously important, but it takes your eyes off the artistry. And like without an audience, most artists aren't motivated to create their best art. As it should be, they should, obviously, like you said, focus on creating the best art, best music they can. And then comes the marketing, not the other way around. Because artists are kind of being fed to focus on marketing so much to where that's on the forefront of anything they do. You know what I mean?
100%. And I get that because there's a lot of pressure to just with the output of music and be able to like match the momentum of their peers. But even to your point, like be able to curate, take a step back, really be intentional with what you're putting out. But more importantly, not just like diluting your catalog with just like just music for the sake of it. And not to say some artists don't do that, but you could take your time, be more intentional with the storytelling. You know, I always like to say music now, a lot of it lacks context, right? You listen to a song, really great melody, and you're kind of like on to the next song.
Yeah.
You know, so how do I intrinsically connect with the song that gives me like real value in terms of like a moment in my life, a story? Like that's we're all connected to like memories and experiences. That's what songs allow us to kind of like, you know, experience.
Yeah.
Like a heartbreak, love, you know, hardship, challenge. Like that's what songs do.
Yeah.
You know.
Ooh, I feel like that because, and you mentioned this with what you just said, is the speed of it. The speed of it to where like, oh, I just put out a song 2 weeks ago. My momentum's slowing down. I need to just create songs, like I said, for the sake of creating songs or for the sake of like building a catalog, to where that speed is taking away meaning and like, I guess the space for music to be appreciated.
Yeah. 100%. And you know, every artist is different. You know, maybe that's for one artist, that's their style. They just want to just put out volume and output and kind of see what hits. Yeah. But I love the more conceptual artists that give you the breadcrumbs to like follow the story or in the world and ecosystem that you're trying to create, and then you get invited and you get vested in it. Yeah. And you're just like, oh, I want some more of this. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, cool. Now I'm just actually locked in. Right. Into it.
Okay, I'm gonna go off the rails from this line of questioning because I think you hit on a lot of different things that I want to touch on. Is with albums, I always have like a split opinion when it comes to albums because I know in current times it's all about pushing singles, but for me, I love a good body of work that takes you into a world. And even people say like, oh, it's not about releasing albums anymore. People want the singles, or you don't need to create music videos anymore because we just need short form content. But that just makes everything, and someone told me this, microwavable as opposed to like gourmet. You know what I mean?
I like the way you put that.
So it's like, you know, depending on the audience you're trying to build, like who do you create for? Because I don't know, maybe it's just my age, but I still want that body of work, that whole 15, 20 track album with the music videos that give me visuals of that world this album lives in. I personally still want that, but you know, current times wants more speed and volume and things like that.
Well, I like to be a contrarian. I mean, that's what the masses may want.
Yeah.
But I think with AI and just like the oversaturation music, I think taste is what's going to separate you from everyone else. Your level of taste in terms of like the way you set up your music, your storytelling, your delivery, your content, like that's what's going to separate, because they're just getting, you know, the most basic, you know, for lack of a better word, basic shit.
Yeah.
And when people get the gourmet stuff, they know the difference.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So instead of the microwave stuff, they get like, oh, this is different.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to separate artists from, you know, just like mass consumption. You know?
An artist that's doing that well right now that I just currently dove into, I mean, he's been around, but Leon Thomas, like I kind of dove into a lot of his interviews lately and how he just performed at I forgot what award show that was, but like the way he speaks about his art is what I wish every artist would kind of see it, where he thinks everything through, every lyric contributes to a world, and he wants visuals of how he performs on stage a certain way, because if everything's like thought out and gourmet, it's not just for the sake of like right now, but he's trying to create something that lasts. You know what I mean?
100%. I mean, I see artists like Leon Thomas or the Victoria Monets, you know, where artists at their stage in their career often, you know, probably 10 years ago would have been like, you know, laughed at because they're like later in their craft, you know. But I think music now, and especially artistry, takes time, it takes maturation. You know, the best things are like fine wine, it just gets better with age.
Right.
So that's the way I see where a lot of these artists, you know, because they don't really find their stride until later in their career.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about, you know, a Leon Thomas story, where you go from like being on like Nickelodeon to being like a Grammy nominated artist. I'm sure he's gonna win.
He's been in the game forever.
Yeah.
People think he's new, like he's a new artist. Like
he's written for like so many people too. So you know, you got to give. Everyone's gonna have their moment. And to your point, I like the artists that have really evolved, have planted their seeds, and now are like really finding their stride now.
Yeah, and like Bruno Mars, dude, he's back obviously with a new album, and it hadn't occurred to me that his last solo album was like 10 years ago, and he had like this interview of like, he takes forever in just creating his songs. You know what I mean? Like, as opposed to like, instead of creating 19, if he can't get you at 9 songs, why create 19? Like he, you know, famously just takes forever on every song because he cares that much. And I feel like because of speed and volume, there's just like the lack of care in the music itself, because they're trying to keep up with the volume and speed of social media.
For sure. But I think at the same time too, and just to like, on the other side of it, there isn't anything, I think if your intention is just to like be visible and be top of mind as a developing artist, and you're like, hey, I want to flood my space with content, I don't think there's also anything wrong with that either, because you want to figure out what content works for you. You're just kind of like testing things out. You know, you're also just trying to be top of mind, where you can kind of scale back to a place where like once you've kind of like found your groove, found your style, found your audience, you can narrow your focus. It's you know, it's just like you have a bigger sample size in the beginning, then you can kind of like narrow that down. You know.
So you're saying it's just a phase in the process.
It's part of it. It doesn't have to be permanent, you know.
Right, because there is that stage of just like figuring out who you are as an artist.
It's exploratory. It's normal, and it should be, you know, done for artists, because if you don't try things, you're kind of limited to like what you know and what's comfortable.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's the evolution of an artist.
Yeah,
because I think that's another misconception, is that artists think they should have it figured out from the jump.
Right.
I mean, do you think today's systems encourage artists to build culture or chase validation?
I think more so the systems itself.
Yeah.
I think in terms of the vanity metrics, the publications, and all the accolades, I would say more so validation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's just like the surface level, right?
Mm-hmm.
More of like the traditional systems, whether it be the awards or like the labels, because they're based off vanity and certain metrics. Whereas community is really about artistry. It's about understanding that you're starting from ground zero, that you have room to grow.
Right.
And without like, expectations are unrealistic, right? Because if you get signed to a label, it's like you have to figure it out within the next year,
Right.
type of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference because they're running a business,
Yeah.
and that's the catch-22. There's two sides of it. But I
Right.
think from a community standpoint, you can be independent, and you can be like, I can actually like figure out my sound, grow, make
Yeah.
mistakes,
Yeah.
iterate.
That's true. You kind of have that, like, I guess, safe haven to have that period of experimentation because
Yeah,
you're taking your community with you.
for
Right.
sure. As opposed if you're signed immediately without really understanding your brand and music, the stakes are so much higher that you're limited to like one or two songs, and then you're just like, okay, if it doesn't perform well, then you're considered a flop.
Yeah.
Know.
Ooh, that's good. That's really good. So you've emphasized community as like a core pillar of sustainability. What does real community provide that platforms can't?
I think for me and probably for you as well is the in-person connection, right? Platforms, we know this day and age, a lot of platforms are digital.
Yeah.
But what we've been able to build in this 10 plus years between the both of us is that real relationship that artists experience when they go to a Traklife event or a Digilogue event. You can't replicate that from a follow or a share.
Yeah.
Like that in-person experience even now is more important than ever.
Agreed. And I like how you put that too, because I go to a lot of networking community events put on by a lot of different platforms, but you really get a sense of like, oh, this feels more so transactional than relational. And I get it, like every brand is trying to build a community, as they should, but it feels like it doesn't seem genuine because they obviously want to sell you something, want you to sign up for something. So I get it, it's a community, but relational side is missing.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, it's to your point. It's like, okay, you join a community, then I'm gonna sell you a course. I'm gonna sell you all this.
Right.
But there are opportunities to monetize, in the future because you want your community to be sustainable. But at the same time, like, people are there because they share the same values as you. They're there because they want to meet like-minded people like you. They're there because they want to be supported by people like you.
Right.
You have to create like a space that a lower barrier of entry. We've talked about this, where they can just come, they can go. There's no pressure.
Yeah.
And when they do see people consistently, they're like, oh, these people, I feel seen, I feel acknowledged. Like this isn't, to your point, just a transactional experience.
Right. Like for people who are creating, similar communities, how do you prevent these rooms from being like echo chambers and hype cycles?
I think it starts with the people that are programming, like understanding at first, like what are your values and why you're even doing it. Because if you don't even know why, then if the reasons and values are just based off building a business, then I don't think the community is there to last. Because I didn't necessarily build a Digilogue to build a business.
Right.
I built it because there was a gap in the space. I was trying to help like-minded professionals and artists meet their kin, meet like-minded minds, and feel seen, feel safe. They could talk shop with.
Right.
Like imagine talking shop with your siblings or people that don't work in music. It's like you're speaking alien. They're like, like I created this podcast. They're like, so
I get that all the time, bro.
So about those Lakers.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to find those spaces because you feel like your truest self when it comes to your interests.
Yeah.
And you just feel like, oh, I feel seen, I feel heard. And that's what's really why I started Digilogue, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then it just evolved to these things because I saw other gaps. I saw a gap for like music jobs, saw a gap for like artist discovery. That's why the pillars, community, careers, art discovery, and education became the Digilogue. It's like, it wasn't just because I knew what it was going to be. This evolved through the needs and listening to the community, you know?
That's good. Because like for us too, and something we're learning to do is like creating community rooms. It's all about filtering. And a lot of these communities from brands that are, like we said, you know, are like more so transactional, they're trying to cater to everybody, which I get. But to prevent it from being more so like hype cycles and echo chambers, you gotta, like you said too, like put our belief out there and our values. And if you align with it, then cool, you belong in this room, you're welcome in this room. But, you know, it's about kind of just standing on our 2 feet of like, this is what we stand for, because it's all about alignment towards like getting the right people who believe in the same thing. You know what I mean? And that's where like, okay, there's an understanding between everyone here because we believe this and that.
100%. And that will translate when you go to a Traklife event or a Digilogue event, because the energy is very different from just going to a branded industry event.
Right.
Like, you just know it's different. Like, you don't see the same people. The energy and the welcomeness is not the same. You know, it's just like everyone is just, you know, trying to look for an opportunity. But here, like, you know, it seems a little bit more collaborative. There's more of like an easiness to like talk to people. Yeah. And people are more prompted to like open up. No, great questions. Great questions. It's a good thing you didn't even send me these, because we just talking.
Oh, did you look it over if I sent it?
No, I did look over it.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. The question I got right now is, there's a growing narrative that artists just need better information to succeed. Do you think information alone is enough, or something deeper missing?
I mean, there's so many factors that comes to that, right? Because you can have the information, right? You can do all the things, but not necessarily achieve the goals that you want. And some has to do with timing, some has to do with luck, access, and also where the state of music is in terms of genre of music and fandom. Yeah. And it's just trying to fit this different pieces into like a puzzle. And it doesn't mean that you're not talented as an artist, but it's just, you know, you're kind of like trying to navigate that with even all the information that you might have. Right. You know, and that's just the reality of it. Yeah. Because you also, I think it's a numbers game. There's so many. Yeah, it is a numbers game. Yeah. There's like artists who are struggling with like, have all this information, I'm doing everything anyone's telling me to do, and I'm still not hitting the goals I want. I'm still not hitting the streams or the audiences. And I think a lot of times from my personal experience working with artists is that they're missing the connection. I think just chasing the numbers like kind of makes them lose sight of, you know what, connect with the few people that are listening. You know what I mean? Like there's people that sticking around, they're actually listening to your music, but you're so focused on chasing A, B, C, and D that, you know, you're forgetting about the people who are already there. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think like just the relationships is missing because people are so caught up in like, okay, 100 listeners is not enough. I need to go for like 1,000. But why don't you take care of the 100 listeners already there with you? For sure. And kind of just build that army. You know what I mean? So, yeah. And that's going to compound over time. Yeah. You know, it's like if you have 10 real fans that you've accumulated through a newsletter, and you put out this bi-weekly newsletter where you offer cool content experiences that is not available on your socials, and the fans really feel like they're being spoken to. You create a space for them to be seen. Right. That compounds over time with other fans opting in, and that 10 fans can be 50 fans, and that 50 fans can be 100 fans. It's all relative. Yeah. You know, I think numbers, it can be skewed and not necessarily telling the whole story. Absolutely. Right? It's like you have 10,000 followers, but who of those 10,000 followers will actually pull up to your show? We don't know, you know? But I think for the people that really know their fans, that don't necessarily have the great social numbers, I admire them because they took the time to do the opposite. Yes. You know? Yes. I feel like that's something every
every artist should hear really, just because it goes to something we were talking about earlier where everyone's chasing validation. You know what I mean? And certain numbers aren't enough to help someone feel validated.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think like Rick Rubin always preaches, like, as long as you're happy with what you created, that should be enough.
No, I agree. And even for us, like when we started building community, like even though I try to get brand sponsorships, and
Yeah.
I was like, just pull up to the event.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna find out. Like our numbers aren't crazy on socials, but the feeling experience and talking to these artists is the value that you're gonna understand why you want to be part of this.
Right. Right. So what's the belief about independence that you once held but now question?
That's a good one. I think the idea that independence is for everyone.
Ooh, words right out of my mouth. I was
Yeah.
going to say the same
I think as an artist, you have to really, I think once you enter that stage of artistry where it's not a hobby anymore, you have to understand like what it's going to take to get you to that next step and really, really to master your craft, right? The dedication and time to put your 10,000 hours towards your music, having that level of like approach and taste towards the things that you want to create, and really taking it seriously. Like I'm going to like really do this.
Yeah.
Not half-ass this.
Yeah.
And this isn't like, you know, where I'm just going to just do this on the side when that's okay. You could be a hobbyist in that respect.
Yeah.
Like you could, because you love it and you just want to do it for fun.
Yeah.
But I think what's going to separate the serious artists is that level of dedication and time and sacrifice.
Yeah. And that's the part where I guess artists learn the hard way. Because I agree. I know as much as like we're all pushing independence is the way to go. Yeah, it's not for everybody. You know what I mean? Not, you know, whether you have a team or not, like being signed to a label might be the right fit for some people. You know what I mean? Like people, because I still know a lot of artists who I want nothing to do with creating content. I just want to be a studio rat and just make music. And that's enough for me.
Yeah.
Right. And I think just people have to know exactly what they want and what they want out of their music. And yeah, I think that's for me, like you, like that's my biggest misconception.
Yeah. I mean, you also have to be autonomous. You have to be self-motivating at times when no one's cheerleading for you. And you got to be your biggest cheerleader, you know, and it's hard as an artist to navigate those periods.
Yeah.
But those artists will separate themselves from everyone else because they've also matured, they've grown, they're working with different people that they trust. And that takes time with maturation. It's not going to happen overnight. Yeah. But people that kind of like will themselves through those periods and you're like finding their stride, as we've seen artists like a Leon Thomas. I'm not saying he's gone through that journey, but you know, it was an overnight success. Right. Right. So I think that's what's going to separate the artists that are really withstanding the test of time.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah.
Sure. All right. So when you look ahead 5 to 10 years, what worries you the most about how artists are being shaped right now?
Yeah, I think we're seeing it now, right, with AI, right? And companies like the Sunos of the world, where, and this is a hot take, where you have these AI artists that companies are essentially fabricating and appropriating from various genres. Now we're seeing that with R&B and country, and taking not only just streams away, but music discovery from the more casual fan, right? A casual fan does not know music between a Sienna Rose, who's like an AI artist, to, you know, Victoria Monet. It sounds great. It's R&B, soul, but they're two different things. One's a real artist, one is an AI artist. Right. And I think it's not fair because companies and people in those positions and also the powers that be are colluding to just, you know, operate in a way where like the bottom dollar and the bottom line is prioritized and not necessarily the craft, the protection of the artist. Yeah. They're not even distinguishing what's AI or not. You know,
Right.
that's half the battle,
Definitely.
because the more casual fan doesn't care.
Yeah,
You know,
for sure.
they don't know any better because they're just being fed music.
Yep.
Like, it's the difference between, I think someone pointed this out. I think it was Will I Am, between when you go to a grocery store,
I
you
just
get
watched that, yeah.
organic oranges versus regular oranges.
Right.
Or if you go to Whole Foods versus, like, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
and I think that's where we need to at least start, is distinguishing between what AI music is versus what's not.
Mm.
And I think there's going to be value to like human made music, because people are going to be like, and we're seeing it now, where like people are like, well, I don't know, that's kind of AI artist. I don't know about that. You know,
Right.
especially if you have taste.
Yes.
I think taste is going to help distinguish the two
Absolutely.
from a fan base standpoint, because it's like, oh, you don't like AI artists? All right, well,
Right.
I guess you don't have that much taste in music then.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And I like how you went there, because my hot take, I know I used to be like, so like anti AI music, just because, you know, we come from an era of like, you know, genuine real music coming from the 90s. But after some time, like, what if AI is like a reset on music culture, to where like it resets music to where it becomes about the art again, and there's like real human artistry music, and then there's AI music and nothing in between.
Yeah, I see that. And I see that with how AI music is being commodified.
There
It's
you
just
go.
like everywhere. And that's, like I said, that could be for the more casual, and they don't care. But if you have taste, you have a great ear, you know what you want to be intentional, and you also want to be authentic. There's also an allure to be able to like appreciate music made from artists.
Yes.
They're like, because if you were like, oh, I like this artist, and you find out like Sienna Rose, you're like, kind of like, I don't know about that.
Right.
You're just like, especially if you have like taste in music.
Yeah.
If you're like casual fans, like, oh, okay, I can expect that from you. I'm not judging you, but I am.
Right. I'm with you right there. 1000%. So what do you hope spaces like the Digilogue help preserve that might otherwise disappear?
So it's actually a great question. One of the things as we approach our 10-year anniversary, 2026, is that we are focusing on 3 superlative statements. First statement is community is everything. And community stands for, obviously, at the heart of why we do this. Learning is forever, because we know that as the industry evolves, education with AI and all these new tools, we have to always have this childlike appetite for like learning, you know, and that's really important for artists, to be like not complacent, comfortable. I always want to learn more new things.
Right.
And lastly, and we kind of spoke about this before the podcast, is respect the craft. We have to respect the artists that put, and creatives and professionals that put 10,000 hours into this, and like really put them in a higher viewpoint, because they put the hours in. They didn't cheat. They didn't just fast track this. They have experience.
Yeah.
And I put more value to that than anyone just like is going ChatGPT finding answers with no context.
Right.
You know,
Running
tell me a
with it.
story. You're just giving me information.
Yeah.
I'm like, but you just give me answers with no context.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with using AI in terms of like information, but like if you're just spewing out things without experiencing it, then to me, like, there's no value to that.
Yeah. Great answer. I love that. All right. Closing question.
Okay.
All right. And this is going to be the question I ask every guest.
Okay.
So, like, what does protecting the art of music look like in practice, not in theory, for independent artists today?
Well, I think transparency between collaborators is important, because if you're using an AI sample, if you're using like production or vocals and certain things in that capacity, you have to be honest with your collaborators. Because I've seen it now where like, you know, talking to a producer recently, he was saying that he was collaborating with another producer that was just like coming up with like concepts and just putting it into Suno. And that was a session.
Okay.
So it's like, you got to be very transparent as to like who you're collaborating with and your intentions, and like incorporating these new things that are, you know, up for discussion.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to use AI, and you got to be honest with your collaborators about it.
Yeah.
Because you can't find out later
Right.
You know,
Not even just your collaborators, but the general public.
Yeah.
There's artists that we've worked with where they'll create the whole song out of AI, but then when it came to like performing it, I'm like, yo, bro, this is not you.
yeah,
I think it's
you're just
acknowledging-
right, even from a fan standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, people are fast tracking it,
Yeah.
and I understand why certain people are doing it,
Yeah.
but you know, at least be honest with it,
Right.
or else you'll be called out for it.
Oh, absolutely. People could smell the BS from far away.
For sure.
But if an artist is listening to this, well, if an artist is listening to this episode, feeling overwhelmed by everything we just talked about, what's one thing you'd want them to slow down and take seriously?
Yeah, I think one thing that I would tell them is to give themselves grace, because oftentimes,
You speak on this a lot too.
yeah, there's so much pressure to be the next superstar or to like, you know, to be the best version of themselves tomorrow. But understand that, you know, their marathon, their journey is theirs.
Yeah.
And I'd say this, like, that's what you need to do first and foremost, because comparison is gonna like destroy you. And not to say you can't reference people for like inspiration, ambition, but don't let that stifle your growth, you know,
Yeah.
stifle your motivation. So
Yeah.
give yourself grace, because or else you're just gonna just burn out and you're gonna be jaded and you're gonna hate what you love, you know.
That's really good, because I've seen more than enough artists give up because they didn't give themselves that grace to keep going and
take time outs, you know.
Yeah.
Give, like, even for me, like I gave myself this year like a sabbatical year. Like we didn't do our conference this year. You asking me like, yo, what are you doing? I said, I'm just doing this,
Yeah.
and this. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm cool.
When I called you, yeah.
Like I'm cool,
Yeah.
and I was like giving myself grace as well.
Yeah. No, that
'cause-
goes for everybody, for sure.
yeah, for everybody, you know, because I think there's this idea that we have to keep going at a certain speed. That's just not sustainable.
Damn, that's so good. I need to take that advice too, because
I'm trying to take it. It's just,
yeah.
you know, just even this year, one of the things that I'm really pushing in 2026 is just enjoying and just having fun.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not having fun, then it's going to be work.
Right. I always keep that in mind too, because like as much as like obviously we love what we do here at Traklife, like there's obviously work that we have to space out and protect mental health and all that. So
For sure.
So yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
a
and
good tip.
especially mental health, considering everything that's happening in the world, like that's, I think, priority number one.
Yeah, for sure. But Drew, man, this was awesome, dude.
Cool.
You gave me a lot I could work with.
No, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate the space, the opportunity to talk. I mean, it's a long time coming.
Yeah,
You know, as a fellow community builder, thank you for having me.
dude,
Great
always
timing
welcome.
too with our tenure.
Yeah, actually,
so,
I didn't even think about that.
yeah.
But hell yeah, bro.
I got it. Yes, sir. Thank you, brother.